Hello guys, welcome back. It's Chaplain Ken, and this is Time with Chaplain Ken. You're here with me. I'm doing it in the evening. I don't know when you're doing it, but I'm glad that you're here watching. I know I haven't been with you guys in such a long time, but it's good to be back. You know, I have some time now, and I'm still going through the book, Get Out of Your Own Way, by Mark Golston and Philip Goldberg. I'm not going to do each chapter. You know, I could do each chapter, but then what's the point of getting the book then, right? It's a good enough book to get. They sell it at Barnes and Nobles. See if you can find it. It's got some really good information. The chapter I want to go through today is about having always to be right. Always having to be right. Did I say that right? Have you ever met anybody that always needs to be right? And what do you think? How do you feel when you're done talking to them? Do you really feel fulfilled? Yeah. Let's talk about it. The author of the book says he had a guy named Tom. Put Tom in quotations because I'm sure he's protecting the innocent. But Tom was a managing editor at a magazine. Tom was passed over. He came to see him and he said he was passed over. He was upset, passed over for a position. And the reason they told him that he was passed over was because of the way he treated people around him. People in the office didn't like him because he was condescending, he was mean, he was rude, didn't get along with the people and talked down to them all the time. That's what they said about him, and so he was passed over. On top of that, his wife decided to divorce him as well. The dude was not having a good week. In their therapy, the therapist learned that he came from an alcoholic family. Both parents were alcoholics. Little background on alcoholism. Not a lot of love is spread out, and a lot of them, and there may be in a few, but most of the times alcoholics tend to be a little bit more critical on their kids. It's part of the cover, you know, but we might talk about that later. But in his life, his parents were very critical to him. Now, if you grow up in a home where everybody's critical to you, or your parents are, the people who are supposed to be informing you and molding you and shaping you to become the man or the woman you're supposed to be, if you're getting criticized from them, they're going to influence, they're going to give you a message. You're going to do one or two things. You're either going to believe it or you're going to fight like crazy to prove it wrong. Well, Tom fought like crazy to prove it wrong. He always needed to be right. And in doing so, when you're always trying to prove to yourself that you're right, or at least that you're not wrong, you then begin making everybody else feel that they're wrong and that there's something wrong eventually with them, because that's the way our minds work. If we're a negative message for long enough, we're going to start believing it after a while. So as an adult, he needed to be right. He needed never to be wrong. And as a result of that, he needed to be in control of everything. Get a picture of this person's character. You may be living with somebody like this, or it might even be you. God forbid. But even if you are, there's hope. Because the person who always has to be right, doesn't want to be wrong, is one like him, always trying to disprove the negative about himself. He's usually coming from a place of insecurity. Somebody who always has to be right and does never want to be wrong is somebody who's been told they were wrong all their lives and will prove it to the hilt that they are right, even if it steps on everybody's toes. And so the desire to be right leads to being in control of people and the message. Because even if somebody disagrees with you, if you need to be right all the time, that person, if you have that insecurity, if you need to be right, will fight against that and take it personal. When it's not, a lot of times, you know, we have discussions like at workplaces about which way we need to go and what we need to do. Somebody comes up with an idea and they think they're right, and they have to be right. If you suggest something different, they take it personal, don't they? Have you ever gone through that in your workplace? Yeah, it's kind of hard to work with, especially when they're the boss. He was the boss. But what about if you're working like if you go into an AA meeting, perhaps, where there's a group of people with ideas, and there's one person that always has to be right, and that person begins to dominate everybody's experience and begins to push their ideas. You can immediately see that. You know, good AA meeting, they'll point that out. They'll even call it out. And it can happen anywhere. If you're a churchgoer and you have somebody in church that always has to be right, it's a person that always needs to be in control. People like this tend to debate when they communicate. A person that needs to be right will not learn how to discuss, but they will be fantastic debaters. They'll want to get into the weeds on everything. They'll challenge everything you have to say. You pastors that are out there, chaplains that are in churches, you know what I'm talking about. The church member that always wants to challenge what you say, or what you're doing, or how you're saying it, or the theology behind it. And yeah, it can get ugly and get really bad, even in a church. It happens that way. It can happen anywhere, in a family, anywhere. So this is what happened to Tom. Tom was this way. Um, so when he went into counseling, he says that um, the counselor would try to talk to him about these things and bring these things up, and Tom would want to debate and argue. And he'd get frustrated. He'd get mad because he didn't want to listen because he was right. You can't tell a guy who's right if there might be something wrong. God forbid. Again, working off of insecurities, working off of old family systems junk, stuff in your history. Man, if you haven't worked on it, you don't know what it is, find somebody that you can talk to. Talk to about it and find out how that is affecting your present, current situations, because it was affecting his job, it was affecting his marriage. Chances are the same thing's happening to you. Um, so if it is, this is your wake-up call. Your friendly one. Look, we all have stuff that we're working off of, and it gets in the way. And sometimes we don't like to be wrong. But yeah, so he went limp in his therapy sessions because he really wasn't getting anywhere trying to get him to see certain things. So he went limp, and this is a technique that counselors use sometimes, and it's a good one. It's just to sit there and listen, because he had lots to talk about and lots to say, because he had to prove himself correct, prove himself right, and his wife wrong. He was right, and the coworkers were wrong. He was right, and his boss was wrong. So he had to prove himself. So the counselor let him talk and talk and talk. Didn't try to fight with him. Didn't try to show him anything. But sit there and listen. This is what going limp looks like. And then finally he got wise to it. He says, "Why aren't you saying anything?" And he goes, "Well, you have plenty to say. I'm giving you space to say it." Eventually, it comes to the place where the individual needs to realize that there may be something wrong with them. And that, man, that's a hard pill to swallow. It is most difficult for us to say, "I'm wrong." It's hard in a marriage. When you mess up in a marriage, I'm not poking anybody. When you mess up in a marriage, and you have to look to the wife or the husband and say, "Honey, I was wrong. You were right." For some of us, that's a hard pill to swallow. Some of y'all shaking your heads, but that's okay. That's a good thing. Um, so um, his counselor went limp, and he began to finally really see that his confrontational way of communicating was not healthy. It wasn't healthy. Um, I've experienced that as well sometimes. You suggest something, you're in a Sabbath school class, Sunday school class, and your Bible study, and somebody wants to prove you wrong, and they say, "So what you're saying then?" And you kind of inside, you have to roll your spiritual eyes because you can't do it outright. But you're always being challenged, and this is because there's an insecurity. And this guy, and I've seen this before working in drug treatment. People come from a history of confrontation at home, and they learn how to debate and confront and argue. And their communication style is that it's always an argument. It's always, "I'm right, prove me wrong," kind of discussion. So if you're in that kind of a discussion with somebody, I know how frustrating that can be. Um, so maybe suggest to you just to go limp and say, "Yeah, that's interesting." You know what I mean? Just, yeah, because anything you say is they're going to try to shoot it down, and it's so frustrating, and it's so sad sometimes, and that kind of communication style it happens a lot in churches, unfortunately. Churches, even work, but it shouldn't be that way. Um, People that are coming from a place of insecurity like that usually tend to need to be in control of everything, so they can control the narrative, they can control what is said, and it's all to secure them in their own insecurities. It's all to give them that allure that they're in charge and they're right, and there's nothing wrong with them. But in actuality, what happens, you're seen as overbearing. And this is what Tom had to learn, that he was overbearing, he was self-righteous, he was disrespectful to his employees, and he finally had to come to terms with that and realize Yeah, I'm a jerk. I'm not good. I remember doing a fifth step with somebody, and well, when they first came into treatment, everything was everybody else's fault. But when they got to the fifth step and they had to do a moral inventory of their life, they came into my office very humbled and realized that they were not in the best shape they thought they were in. They did a lot of soul searching while they were in treatment. They came to that realization. And believe it or not, that's when they started getting better, when they were able to see it. So if you're starting to see it and feel it, it's okay. Don't despair. We all have to look at ourselves honestly and realize, you know what, I don't have it all together. I've gotten it wrong. I've done some things that are wrong. All right. Because once you do that, then you can find a solution, right? You find a solution for it all. You start healing. You start being humble. You start loving. So in concluding, when you're looking at somebody like this, what's really happening is that they're acting out their insecurities. There's a defensiveness, a defensive posture, which comes off as offensive to other people that are there. People that have this condition probably can't learn anything new. It's difficult for them to learn because, like the saying says, they know it all. And eventually what happens when people begin to tolerate you at work or at church or at home, people tolerate you just so you could stop talking. And the connection that you make with people is very shallow because you're always wrong in their eyes. And who wants to live with somebody like that? Who wants to go through that? So, yeah, you end up alienating people if this is happening to you. So, in his book, he suggests some things about taking action. He says, think of yourself at a time in your life when you were optimistic and nope, I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong page. My mistake. See, I was wrong. He says, next time you feel the need to show you're right, ask yourself if winning is important enough to risk hurting others and being resented. Yeah, so next time you feel you need to show that you're right, what's the payoff? Just an honest question. Is it worth it being right? Dr. Phil says, you want to be right or you want to be happy in your marriage when you're talking to your wife. Sometimes it's okay to be wrong, and sometimes it's okay to give in, and sometimes it's good to compromise and say, okay, all right, I see your point. Relax. The universe will still spin on. He suggested look for feedback. If you're acting like a know-it-all, others will respond by either fighting back or acting defenseless and subdued, and then they'll begin to avoid you. Now, if you were like me, like what I did with my anger when I was younger, I kept people at bay. I liked that because then they left me alone. So if you have the idea where you think you're right and nobody ever confronts you and you feel that you're happy, boy, what a doleful place to be. What a lonely place to be. I ended up being very lonely. And it wasn't until years later I realized what I was doing was messing my own life up. So if you are that way and you realize you're all alone, perhaps right now you feel like you're all alone because you don't really have anybody you can open up to and be real with because you have to be right all the time. Perfect. That perfectionism, boy, that's a heinous thing. If that ever gets inside your skull, ugh, please find somebody to reach out and work on that. Perfectionism will never let you get there. And perfection, because you have to have things perfect, you have to control everything else. Much like this guy. He had to have this perfection streak in him as well. So, yeah, you don't want to go there. You don't want to look there. So look for feedback. Ask somebody, hey man, am I a know-it-all? And then listen. And don't say, no, I'm not. Listen. So, and he also says, in proving you're not wrong, make sure you don't make others feel wrong. Because this is what happens. This kind of a personality has to be right all the time. Usually a charismatic person will have this kind of personality, an A-type personality. They need to be right, and so they're up front. And so they will create an atmosphere where people just don't fight with you anymore, and then they get silent, they get subdued, and they lose their voice, and you hurt them. And you can do this in a home, you can do this at work, this can happen even in a church. Where people lose their voice and don't say anything because the fight's just not worth it. And then as a result, this person feels themselves being elevated, like they're winning. It's a sick game, but it happens, doesn't it? Have you seen it? Comment below if you've seen it and let me know what it was like for you. Yeah, I've seen it. And then he suggests recognize and acknowledge the value of other people's opinions and viewpoints. may take some work for somebody who thinks they're right all the time. If you've offended someone, admit when you're wrong. It's always the best way to reconnect. Admitting when you're wrong. Somebody once said that an apology without um, acknowledgement is manipulation. Makes sense? So if you're apologizing, say why. 12-steppers, when they make amends, they have to own up to their junk, and they do. I'm proud of those guys. You guys that are in recovery, every time I think about these kinds of things, I think of y'all that are really working your steps. When you're making your 8th and 9th step and you're making your amends and you come up and you say, yeah, I've done this, I was bad, I was wrong, it was horrible of me, what can I do to make it right? Fantastic. So an apology, we hear apologies a lot and they don't make much sense. They're not very genuine if it's just the words. Kind of like when you tell your kids, tell your brother you're sorry. Sorry. They don't mean it. So sometimes we're like that as adults. Don't mean it. So acknowledgement. Acknowledge when you're wrong and make the thing right. It will bring the two of you together. So if you've offended someone, admit you were wrong. It's the best way to reconnect. Observe what it feels like to be not right. Can you handle the feeling? Remember, the reward is that you don't alienate people. It's okay to be wrong sometimes. It's not a value thing. It doesn't cheapen you. It just means you're human. Sometimes we're wrong about certain things. Yeah. So instead of being a know-it-all, strive to know all of it. Take into consideration the point of view of other people and the requirements of the situation as a whole. Learn every side of the story. Somebody's going to know more than you eventually. You can't be right all the time. That's that chapter. I thought it was a good chapter. It's good to be back with you guys. I'm going to go through parts of the book. I might do just a few more and then call it quits, and so that you can go out and buy the book. Go and get this book. It's got good stuff in it, and you'll be able to take the time to spend moments with it and really pondering it. There are chapters in here about letting fear run your life. Oh, that's a good one. Remember, these are self-defeating behaviors. These are things we do that mess our world up. Feeling sorry for yourself. It's good stuff. Practical stuff. So it says more than 200,000 copies sold, so it's got to be, it's a good book, well written. So that's that. Thanks for joining me. I'm glad that you're with me. I hope you learned something. I hope it challenges you to continue watching these, what do you call these, vlogs? What I'm doing, posts? I don't know, wherever you're reading and seeing this, I hope it made sense to you. And I hope you learned something. In the future, I'm debating on what I'm going to do next. I know that I have a contact in Africa that needed help with the addiction problem in his back home with people back home, and alcohol and drinking and are involved. And my wife and I were asked if we would do something on video to put together like a program, a video program where these guys can go into like a video treatment, maybe even like have Zoom counseling sessions with them and help them out in a way, because they're really struggling over there with addictions where he lives, in the city where he lives, where he's from. So my wife and I will be working on that together. It'll be 12-step based. She's the counselor. She'll be doing the psychosocial stuff, and I will be doing the spiritual stuff. Chaplain, right? So that part's left with me. So I would solicit your prayers and good thoughts about that, and keep me in your thoughts as we continue to make those videos for that outreach. And also, I'm thinking of getting Jordan Peterson's book. He wrote a book recently. What do you call it? 10 Rules for Life Living. I need to look it up. But I've been watching some of his lectures. Pretty interesting stuff. Very sharp intellectual man. So I was thinking of getting one of his books. If you guys have ideas and you think you want me to go through a topic or a book that you have seen or heard about, let me know in the comments, and I'll give it a shot, and I'll look it up and see what I can come up with. But I'm glad you're with me. It's good to be back with you. I like doing these kind of things. I'm not getting paid or anything. This is just me reaching out, trying to help, to be a resource for somebody, and I hope that it's been a blessing to you. Okay, well, take care, and I will see you the next time.